Happy Good Friday. This is how some non-Christian people may greet you, and you may be taken by surprise, as no one says, wishing you a happy Good Friday. You may have been involved in a situation like this, and if you have, you may have remembered having corrected that person back then, but after all those years, I now agree that they are not wrong after all. The readings for today bring out what makes this Friday a Good Friday. The first reading taken from Isaiah consists of the fourth servant song, known as the Suffering Servant Song. In the New Testament, the servant is identified with Christ. The servant suffered and sacrificed his life in reparation for the sins of others. Closely connected with the reading is the concept of substitutionary atonement or vicarious atonement. Atonement is an often used Old Testament term representing making amends for sin or repairing the spiritual damage and restoring relationships broken by sin. St. Paul in the letter to the Romans tells us that sin's wages are death, meaning that death is what sin deserves. In the Old Testament, atonement took the form of animal sacrifices, a process known as substitutionary atonement, institutionary meaning that God will accept a substitute to absorb the punishment for our sins, and atonement meaning that we can be restored to full fellowship with God. The question that is often asked is such vicarious suffering unjust? We can say that there are two reasons people choose to end their suffering: love and justice. Parents who have suffered and sacrificed for their children are a perfect example of suffering for love, and those who suffer fighting for the rights of others are a perfect example of suffering for justice. We are called to a life of self-sacrificing love, and Christ shows us what that should look like. The second reading taken from the book of Hebrews highlights Jesus' dual role as the Son of God and High Priest. Our High Priest's solidarity with us and sympathy towards us is not unfounded. He too experienced what we experience. The only difference between Jesus and us is that Jesus was without sin, which enables him to offer sacrifice on behalf of our sins, as both the ultimate high priest and the ultimate sacrifice. In contrast to the Old Testament understanding, where only the high priest was able to enter the Holy of Holies to offer sacrifice on the Day of Atonement. Now we are exhorted to approach the divine throne with boldness to receive mercy and find grace to help in our time of need. We can put our faith in Jesus because he has walked in our shoes, has experienced life as we know it, from birth to death, and has experienced hunger and thirst, and a world of poverty and suffering. Having experienced human life to its fullest, Jesus can support and lift us when we are weak and sinful. The Passion narrative taken from John begins with the picture of a garden where Jesus will be betrayed, and it concludes in a garden where Jesus will be buried. The reading, in a way, is a reflection of the choices we make in our life. To understand this, we need to analyze the various characters in the Passion narrative. First, we look at Judas Iscariot, popularly known as the traitor. It is widely believed that Judas was most probably part of the group of zealots who believed in the establishment of the reign of the Messiah by force and violence. Though Jesus, at first glance, appeared to be the Messiah, Judas hoped, for soon he realized that the message of Jesus was not that of violence and power, but of love and forgiveness. It was not about taking life, but rather laying it down for the sins of others. Some biblical commentators believe that Judas betrayed Jesus to force him to act as the Messiah. He hoped, for in our lives as well, we, like Judas, get so stuck in our way of thinking that it becomes difficult for us to see another perspective. Our prejudices against people, our convictions, and our beliefs become most important. We won't hesitate even to harm others to prove ourselves right. The second character is Peter, the rock upon which Jesus would build a church. Impetuous, brave, and even willing to use the sword when required. However, it is the same Peter who denies Jesus 3 times. He is not around while Jesus drags his cross up the hill, nor is he standing at the cross with the women and the beloved disciples. We could say that he was all talk and no action. However, it was fear that got the better of him. At times in our lives, we are afraid of what people will say about us. We are afraid to commit to Jesus every time. We choose to play safe instead of following the values of Christ. We follow in the footsteps of Peter and say, "I am not a disciple of Jesus." The third character is Pontius Pilate. 3 times, Pilate says he can find no case against Jesus and tries to release him until charges are flung against Pilate himself. If you release this man, you are no friend of the emperor. things just got personal. If Pilate continues to defend this king of the Jews, his power is at risk. At times, we too act like Pontius Pilate. We prefer to be silent spectators, instead of getting our hands dirty. The fourth group of people are the Jewish high priests and the religious authorities. Jesus was a thorn in the flesh right from the beginning. Insecurity and jealousy prompt the Jewish authorities to scheme against Jesus and try him without giving him a fair trial. The fate of Jesus is shared by many today, who are unjustly put behind bars due to draconian laws, without recourse to a fair trial. How often do we resort to judging people, without making an effort to know the whole truth? The last person to look at is Jesus himself. Though he had the power, he doesn't come down from the cross. Jesus' experience of God was one of unconditional love from his upper Father, and in his last moments, he lives out this unconditional love. Jesus knew that Peter would deny him, and he knew that Judas would betray him, yet he loved them and accepted them, with all their flaws and imperfections. We find no greater proof of God's love for us than in Jesus' free offering of his life for us. On the cross, Jesus' last words, "It is fulfilled," expresses triumph instead of defeat. He remained true to the Father's love until the end. I would like to recall what Pope Francis mentioned about the cross a few years earlier. He stated, "The cross is the holy sign of God's love and a sign of Jesus' sacrifice, and it is not to be reduced to a superstitious object or an ornamental necklace." In moments of devotion, further goodwill closens us to our neighbor. We look at Jesus and go forward, but in the moments when the cross comes, we flee. The cross is not something to flee from, but rather embrace. This day, I invite you to spend some time in prayer, in front of the crucified Lord, contemplating the cross as a sign of God's mercy and forgiveness. Jesus Christ has freed us with his cross from the termination of sin. And as I mentioned right at the beginning, it is indeed a Good Friday. May God bless us all.